We've got big news for those following Palantir closely, but please tread carefully. And honestly, I think it's important to at least comb through the facts so far around this potential $1.5 billion being shared around. Now, first, I was just scrolling through X and came across Karp's really eye catching breaking news posts. And I've shared some of his stuff before, actually, on previous videos, where he's pretty quick at finding a lot of the government centered work. So if you're interested, go please give him a follow. Now, take the time to read through the post if you'd like, but you can also just go to the sam.gov website, just so you know I'm referencing the direct source for the video. But I think there are some big caveats a lot of people should at least understand before taking into everything at face value, and definitely not trying to dilute or devalue the importance of this news, but still, the devil is in the details. Now, just for the quick background on where Palantir is today, at least for the Titan project, the latest awarding of the $178 million was for phase 3, essentially cementing Palantir as the prime, who will be going forward as the prime with the development of these vehicles. This was essentially them versus RTX, or formerly Raytheon, where they competed in the previous two trial phases, but Palantir came out on top. The latest phase that they're in right now is still technically for development, but Palantir is actually the sole winner as the prime for the project and running that. And they are running this alongside a bunch of subcontractors, especially since they need those hardware aspects fulfilled. And the most recent news about this is that there's been at least one vehicle delivered already to an army base out in Washington. And that's to probably go through some rigorous field testing and provide feedback to the team. And so in a nutshell, that's where we are today. And they're really just trying to improve the vehicle. And there are three major things to look out for, and I'll point those out throughout the documentation here. But for reference, just to show this is a brand spanking new kind of RFI, is the original published date for this is August 15th, 2024, so just a day ago. And also note the original response date being requested is for September 4th, 2024. So this is literally around the corner in about 2.5 weeks as of this recording. So it seems there are expectations around a pretty quick turnaround time, at least to receive a response, even though we in the public may not hear anything immediately at that point, but it's still interesting to see how quick this is. Now, in the description, we've got some meaty stuff right at the top. This is for a RFI posting or request for information, essentially where the government is looking to have responses from the vendors around whatever they're seeking for this specific project, which is Titan production. And it's important to note that this is blatantly pointed out. This is not an RFP or request for proposal, which anyone working in corporate America knows this is where you're looking for companies to give you essentially the checklist you're asking for of requests to determine who should win your business and whatever you're looking for and to fill that. So this is blatantly clear. This is not an RFP and will be for planning purposes only. And even not, this is not a commitment, implied or otherwise, that a procurement action will be issued. So it's very important. This doesn't mean something will happen just because they did this RFI, but they are seeking to get thoughts for the production, continued updates, and initial support of Titan. And honestly, I'm like 99% sure it makes sense just for Palantir to put this together anyways, because first, it helps them figure out the economics essentially on their side behind delivering on this contract profitably in a substantial manner for if/when this becomes a full-blown product, but also on the government side who wants info on their end, obviously for budgeting and political purposes, honestly, when it comes to prioritization. And if it wasn't clear enough, there's no money getting exchanged here, and clearly the government doesn't want to show any expectations of money being at play here, but this is standard stuff. Now, we get the synopsis, and honestly, this isn't new information too for those following the project closely, and shouldn't be a surprise to Palantir either and the subcontractors, but it's clearly spelled out here. The real big reason for this is to scope out really the next phase of Titan once they get to that point. It won't be an instant process, especially since they are getting through those initial 10 prototypes, which will most likely all be iterated on and throughout the whole phase. But like anything, once they found what they like or is good enough for a large-scale rollout, how will this actually be going out there and work, especially on the cost end of things? And read through the mission too if you haven't, but essentially Titan is providing 21st century technology to the military and be a vehicle that's actually developed with a holistic perspective of hardware and software together, and not one or the other being an afterthought or something slapped on. And to add to the early look we are getting at now, their program status is at least planning out a fiscal year 2026 start of production phase, so we've got some time here for any fruition of actually starting this. Then we get through some standard requests for the RFI response, but here's where all the eyeballs are looking at. First is the requested information and the scope, which makes sense confirming this is for the production phase of Titan vehicles, but the cost is ranging from $1 up to $1.5 billion. So nothing is guaranteed here, of course. it's a range, but it is a big clue, at least from the government's perspective, where they can see the costs of this production phase going. Now, schedule-wise, which some do and don't like, this is fiscal year 2026 to 2031. So 5 years, even at $1.5 billion total, if you get all 100%, is only $300 million a year. And the biggest thing to remember too that I mentioned is that Palantir is the prime on this, but there are plenty of subcontractors too in the mix. One really notable is Anduril, so the ratio of how much goes to who really is my best guess, and I won't even attempt to figure out this, even given how early and scant on details we are. So some may see this 300 million a year and really get divided up pretty fast on a per year basis and down to a per quarter basis, and that's even assuming the whole amount is even going to be required, considering $1.5 billion is the max, at least for this RFI. So it's really important that the details are at least considered before running with the headlines. And we do get more juicy details of showing from the government side. They think this is around 94 Titan vehicles for this $1.5 billion, 36 being advanced, where they get all the bells and whistles essentially, while 58 are basic. And they list a bunch of the other needs too, like the hardware and software compatibility, the level of security, everything. So I know we went through a lot, but I think it's important to note the $1.5 billion is a sexy headline, but really it may not be the most optimistic look, and this is only an RFI. So we weren't even at a point to say this is an RFP that Palantir's up for grabs to win and sign, of course. Now, it would be nice if that was at the case, but it looks like it's a bit too early to even consider that. But maybe that's pessimistic, considering the government is always slow. And I think getting a sneak peek still of what's to come is still very encouraging and positive and something to look forward to. It's just balancing this without getting too ahead of ourselves, honestly, in my own personal opinion at least. Now, we won't get too in depth on this as well, but also just recently noted, Alex Karp got showcased on the New York Times with a huge piece that you can read through. It's quite long actually, and it's detailed, and honestly they get a lot of things right when it comes to Alex Karp, considering the author was able to sit down and really get the chance to have him speak his mind and give his perspective. Now, there's plenty of things to agree and disagree with, of course, and that's probably going to be different from every person, but it's not going to be surprising at all for those who follow the company and the CEO closely. But one really big thing to note, though, is kind of related to Titan, and super broadly, though, just to warn you, is this world outlook, and that the US is going to possibly find themselves in a three-front war with China, Iran, and Russia, the main adversaries, essentially. Now, I'm not saying he wants this to happen, or it's going to happen, or anyone wants this to happen, but at least from an investor perspective and someone who knows what Palantir does and the work they do and leading the charge for the Titan project, it is kind of interesting. Being on the edge of technological development for defense is a pretty interesting place to be, especially if you expect to find ourselves in the near future somewhere precarious like that. Now, it really means his personal belief is set that we got to prepare for the worst, where even nuclear deterrence doesn't seem to be enough at this point. And really, this pursuit of defending the West through a very strong offense, and of course still having a good defense, is necessary for survival. It may sound a bit extreme, but it doesn't take a genius to know that war is also won on the logistical end of things, where if you're juggling three fronts, things can get pretty complicated. Hence, you want to leverage technology and just utilize the information you have at hand, which is the point of Titan. So not wanting to get too into the weeds, we get all this interesting government business information out of Palantir this weekend. But honestly, I still see the growth being driven by commercial, because the lumpiness of these contracts and unpredictability can hit later than expected or even end up smaller, especially if we get diluted amongst a bunch of subcontractors. But hey, it's still a great way to prove your value for more projects down the line for the government, especially if we see a jumbo number like this. But what are your thoughts still below? And I'll see you in the next video.